Most people assume growing food automatically means constant work. Endless watering, endless weeding, endless pest problems, and one more chore waiting every time you step outside. It sounds true, but surprisingly, some vegetables are so easygoing that they almost feel like cheating. They sprout fast, forgive missed days, keep producing with very little fuss, and in some cases, they practically reward neglect more than overmanagement. That's because the easiest vegetables don't ask for perfection. They ask for sunlight, a decent start, and then they mostly just want you to get out of the way. In today's video, we're counting down 7 zero-effort vegetables every lazy gardener needs. And stay until the end, because the number one vegetable on this list is so absurdly low maintenance that you can plant it, walk away for months, and still come back to a harvest that feels way more impressive than the effort you gave it. Let's get started. At number 7, radishes. If you are the kind of gardener who gets discouraged easily, radishes are one of the best confidence boosters you can grow. They don't ask for much, and more importantly, they don't keep you waiting forever. That matters. A lot of vegetables make you work for weeks before you see anything exciting. Radishes move fast, very fast. In good conditions, they go from seed to harvest in just a few weeks, which means you get results before boredom has time to set in. Another reason radishes are perfect for lazy gardeners is that they don't need a complicated setup. No cages, no trellises, no heavy feeding schedule, no long season of babysitting. Just loosen the soil a little, keep it reasonably moist, and they do their thing. And because they mature so quickly, they spend less time sitting in the garden attracting problems. That short timeline makes everything easier. Fewer chances for mistakes, fewer chances for pests, fewer chances to forget what you planted in the first place. They also fit into tiny spaces. You can tuck them between slower crops, grow them in shallow containers, or fill random empty patches with them, and still end up with a harvest. For people who want quick food with almost no drama, radishes are one of the simplest wins in gardening. Sometimes the easiest vegetable isn't the one that grows the biggest. It's the one that gives you a reward before your motivation disappears. At number 6, green onions. Some vegetables feel demanding from the moment they go into the ground. Green onions feel the opposite. They're compact, useful, forgiving, and weirdly convenient. That last part matters more than people realize. If something is easy to harvest and easy to use, you're far more likely to actually appreciate growing it. Green onions don't need much space, which means you can grow a lot of them in a very small area. They also don't require the kind of support, pruning, or constant monitoring that more complicated crops do. Once they're growing well, they become one of those vegetables you can grab whenever you need them. A few for eggs, a few for soup, a few for stir-fry, and suddenly your garden starts feeling practical instead of decorative. Another reason lazy gardeners love green onions is that they don't demand perfect timing the way some root crops do. You pull them when they reach a size you like. That flexibility makes the whole crop feel low pressure. You're not constantly worrying about a narrow harvest window. You're just using them as you need them. And because they grow upright instead of sprawling everywhere, they stay organized. No chaos, no takeover, no wrestling through leaves trying to find the edible part. For small gardens, patio planters, and people who want maximum usefulness with minimal effort, green onions quietly become one of the smartest things you can grow. Not flashy, not dramatic, just easy, reliable, and always worth having nearby. At number 5, bush beans. This is where lazy gardening starts getting really satisfying, because bush beans don't just grow easily. They produce enough to make you feel like you actually know what you're doing. And the best part is, they do it without the extra work that pole beans usually demand. No tall trellis. No complicated structure. No vines trying to climb everything in sight. Bush beans stay compact, and that alone removes a huge layer of effort. They also mature fairly quickly, which means you're not waiting half the season for proof that your garden is working. Once they get going, they start handing you harvest after harvest from plants that take up surprisingly little space. That kind of return is exactly what lazy gardeners want, not maximum labor, maximum payoff. Another underrated advantage is that beans don't need heavy feeding the way some greedy vegetables do. They're not the divas of the garden. Give them sun, reasonable moisture, and a weed-free start, and they usually settle in just fine. That makes them ideal for gardeners who want food without a full-time relationship with their soil. And when harvest time comes, bush beans make the garden feel productive fast. A short row or a few plants can suddenly give you enough beans for multiple meals. That's when the magic happens. You stop seeing the garden as a project and start seeing it as a source. For a lazy gardener, that's the dream. Plants that show up, stay manageable, and actually deliver. At number 4, Swiss chard. This vegetable does not get enough credit, especially from people who want a garden that keeps going without constant intervention. Swiss chard is one of those rare crops that combines toughness, flexibility, and a long harvest season in a way that feels almost unfair. While other greens can get fussy, bolt early, or collapse the moment weather turns against them, Swiss chard just keeps showing up. That's one of the biggest reasons it belongs on this list. It is forgiving. Heat comes along, and it slows down a little, but it doesn't immediately panic. Cool weather returns, and it starts producing again. Spring through fall, it just keeps offering leaves. That kind of reliability is gold for lazy gardeners because it means fewer replantings, fewer disappointments, and fewer moments of realizing an entire crop suddenly gave up on life. Another huge advantage is the harvest style. You don't need to pull the whole plant. Just take the outer leaves and let the center keep growing. That turns one planting into a long-running food source instead of a one-time event. It also makes harvest easier because you can take only what you need and leave the rest alone. No rush, no pressure, no all-at-once overwhelm. Swiss chard is also surprisingly attractive, which is a nice bonus for anyone who wants a garden to look good while doing very little. Bright stems, big leaves, and steady production. It's one of the best examples of a vegetable that earns its space over and over again without asking much in return. Breaking into the top 3, kale. Kale is one of the most dependable vegetables a lazy gardener can plant, mostly because it doesn't act fragile. Some crops behave like every weather change is a personal attack. Kale is tougher than that. It handles cool weather beautifully, keeps producing over a long stretch of time, and often becomes sweeter after cold snaps. That kind of resilience makes life easier. The real secret with kale is that it doesn't have to be harvested all at once. Just pick the lower leaves and let the top keep growing. That means one plant can keep feeding you for much longer than people expect. You don't need a huge patch either. A few healthy kale plants can quietly supply a surprising amount of food over time. That's exactly the kind of math lazy gardeners like. Less planting, longer return. Kale also gives you breathing room. Miss the perfect harvest day? Usually not a disaster. Forget to pick for a little while? It's still standing there. Compared to crops that need constant timing and attention, kale feels refreshingly patient. And patient vegetables are always easier to live with. There's also something satisfying about growing a crop that looks productive for such a long time. Even when you're not doing much, kale makes the garden look alive, full, and successful. And once people realize how little drama it brings compared to fussier vegetables, it often becomes one of the permanent members of the garden. Not because it's trendy, because it's dependable. And dependable is exactly what lazy gardening is all about. At number 2, zucchini. Yes, zucchini can have pest issues in some areas, but when people talk about vegetables that give ridiculous returns for very little effort, zucchini always ends up in the conversation. And for good reason. Few plants are as famously productive. One healthy zucchini plant can make a gardener feel wildly more successful than they actually are. That's the beauty of it. You do not need a giant planting. You do not need a complicated strategy. In many gardens, 1 or 2 plants are more than enough. In fact, planting too many is the mistake. Zucchini has a way of going from cute little seedling to full-blown food factory before people are mentally prepared for what's happening. Another reason it works for lazy gardeners is that the reward shows up fast and keeps coming. Once the plant starts producing, it doesn't politely hand you one vegetable and rest for a while. It keeps going, and going, and going. That constant output creates momentum in the garden. Suddenly you're harvesting often, cooking from your own yard, and wondering why more vegetables can't be this generous. It also helps that bush varieties stay more manageable than people expect if given enough space from the start. That part matters. Lazy gardening is not about creating future problems. It's about avoiding them early. Give zucchini room, plant it on time, and it can become one of the most rewarding low-effort vegetables you'll ever grow. Sometimes the secret to feeling productive in the garden is not growing more plants. It's growing one plant that behaves like 5. And finally, at number 1, garlic. If there is a true champion of lazy gardening, this might be it. Garlic is almost absurd in how little attention it asks for, compared to how satisfying the harvest feels. You plant individual cloves in the fall, give them decent soil and good drainage, cover them up, and then, that's basically it for a long while. That long quiet stretch is exactly why garlic deserves the top spot. It doesn't need daily checking. It doesn't need constant harvesting. It doesn't sprawl, climb, wilt dramatically because you looked at it wrong, or demand some elaborate support system. It just sits there through the cold season building toward a harvest most people barely feel like they earned. And honestly, that is lazy gardening at its finest. Another reason garlic is so satisfying is that it turns patience into something tangible. Months after planting, you pull up real bulbs from the soil, cure them, store them, and suddenly you have homegrown garlic lasting far beyond harvest season. That makes the effort to reward ratio feel almost ridiculous. A small action in one season creates flavor for months afterward. It also helps that garlic doesn't deal with huge insect pressure compared to many other vegetables, especially when planted in the right conditions. Well-drained soil keeps problems down, and the crop itself stays refreshingly straightforward. No endless guessing, no complicated management. Just a simple cycle that fits beautifully into real life. For lazy gardeners, that's the holy grail. A crop you plant once, think about occasionally, and celebrate later like you pulled off something impressive. Garlic doesn't just belong on this list, it practically defines it. The biggest mistake many people make is assuming a successful vegetable garden has to be high effort. More work, more fuss, more complexity, more time. But that is not always true. Sometimes the smartest garden is the one built around vegetables that naturally cooperate. Vegetables that grow quickly, recover easily, tolerate a few mistakes, and keep producing without turning into a weekly crisis. That's why crops like radishes, green onions, bush beans, Swiss chard, kale, zucchini, and garlic are so valuable. They lower the barrier, they reduce the stress, they make gardening feel doable for busy people, tired people, beginners, and yes, lazy gardeners too. Because the goal isn't to prove how hard you can work. The goal is to grow food in a way you'll actually keep doing. And once you realize how much food can come from a handful of easygoing vegetables, the whole idea of gardening starts to change. It stops feeling like a chore list and starts feeling like leverage. A few simple plants, a little sunlight, a little patience, and a lot more harvest than you expected. If you've ever thought gardening takes too much effort, these are the vegetables that can change your mind. And once you grow a few of them successfully, don't be surprised if lazy gardening starts looking a lot like smart gardening.